Back live tonight on In Focus, Open Secrets has written an opinion piece that reflects on the role of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Director of Prosecutions, Shamila Batohi, and this is in tackling economic crimes and state capture. The non-profit organization says in the past week alone, systemic failures have been revealed to the broader public as they come to the glare of the public, showing that impunity has been entrenched at the national prosecuting authorities, and persons who are engaged in economic crime go without being brought to account. Let's unpack this opinion piece a little bit further. We're joined by Director at Open Secrets, Hennie van Vuuren. Good to have you with us, and thank you very much for your time. Just this Monday, the President, writing one of his usual letters, he expressed there that one of the most effective things that his administration has done is to restore the functions of key institutions that were hollowed out during state capture, one of those being the NPA, the SIU, and the Hawks. Do you believe they've been reformed? Do you have faith in the work that has been done at those institutions? Have they made great strides?
Yeah, Thabo, good evening. I think firstly we need to recognize that there has been a change in leadership, a dramatic change in leadership. These are institutions, the Hawks and the NPA, that were hollowed out during state capture. It was part of the state capture project to ensure that all of our law enforcement agencies, including the intelligence agencies, were not only staffed with people who would aid and abet the corrupt in their activities, but would be unable to do most of the fundamental kind of work that they were doing. So that's why we haven't seen any proper prosecution of large-scale economic or financial crimes for more than 10 or 12 years, successful prosecution in South Africa. And so I think what we have seen is a change in leadership. We don't necessarily, for example, at the NPA have the same, frankly, corrupt leadership which we had seen previously, and it has taken an effort to get some of the top people changed. But that doesn't mean that the institutions have proven themselves to be effective, and that's the real measure. It's not about getting nice people to head up institutions. It's about effective leadership that will be able to enforce the law, to hold the powerful to account for the crimes they have committed against the South African people. And there the NPA has failed, and there I think both the President and the leadership of the NPA frankly try and gloss over what is the status quo, and that status quo is just frankly the inability to be able to see through complex cases of corruption and economic crime that they require to.
Yeah. Is he overplaying his hand here, the President, saying, let me quote, one of the most effective tools for combating money laundering and other financial crimes is the multidisciplinary Fusion Center, which we established in 2020. He says the Fusion Center brings together bodies like the NPA, SIU, SARS, the Hawks, Crime Intelligence, State Security, and the FIC. Since its inception in 2020, work that has been done there includes the recovery of approximately 1.75 billion in criminal assets. Is he overplaying his hand?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think we need to recognize that there are strides that have been made. The SIU, for example, the Special Investigations Unit, has been effective in being able to identify stolen assets where they're obviously tasked to do so by the President himself. And we've seen some moves in the positive direction. But ultimately, what we need are criminal prosecutions of the elites who are responsible, so that they don't creep back into the system. And we send a message to the big corporations from around the globe, the consulting companies, the Bains, the McKinseys, the KPMGs, the ABBs, the Glencores, and the individuals, the Guptas, the Iqbal Sharmas, the Anuj Singhs, and of course the Brian Molefes, a range of other people who are implicated in state capture, that what Judge Zondo did last year in producing a report wasn't only a book of memory in South Africa, but it's an agenda for action by the President, and by the President, but clearly by the law enforcement agencies in South Africa. And what we saw, Thabo, I think, our argument that we're making at Open Secrets is that in the last week there was an incredibly important case that was obviously heard in Bloemfontein in the High Court, the so-called New Lane matter. It was going to be the first proper prosecution of the Gupta networks, and it would have had the potential to ensure that we start to speed up the Gupta extradition process. Now, what we saw was the NPA go into a fight they knew was coming. They were facing not only corrupt officials from the Free State, but they were facing money launderers, Iqbal Sharma and Ronika Raghavan. And firstly, much of the evidence that they had not properly prepared, and so that wasn't admitted by the judge, who simply correctly took the decision they couldn't accept it. But crucially, Thabo, what the NPA failed to do is to take the Gupta leaks. And remember, that was this mountain of email evidence that was able to tell us how the Gupta network had set up this architecture for corruption and money laundering and moved tens of billions of rands out of our country over a number of years. Those Gupta leaks, they could not make a proper argument as to why it must be admitted into evidence. And so what happened was the state's case fell apart. They knew this was coming. They knew they had to prepare. One would imagine that the national director and her colleagues would have said to those prosecutors, I want to see that you are ready to take on this matter. They simply weren't. They've sent a signal to the corrupt corporations and individuals that the NPA is all over the place. They're not prepared, and you're going to be able to walk all over us. And I think that's not what we need in terms of our ability to tackle those networks. So, I think it both sends the wrong signal to the other side, to those corrupt networks, and equally it sends the wrong signal to the South African people who have every right to demand that these public officials who are well paid do their jobs in terms of the Constitution. And right now, that's not happening.
Yeah. One of the things that we have done in record time, and of course we applaud the parliamentarians for doing that, was to really cover these the legal space, the laws. The laws are in place, and they managed to put some rather critical bills through just in time. But what I gather from what Fatif is saying is that one of the major issues that are lacking as far as our financial intelligence is concerned is, one, talent. That we seemingly don't have people who are skilled in this particular area of work, but two, we are also not demonstrating the will to actually prosecute, as you're putting it. I mean, the Nulani case is case number one from the state capture that is actually now in our courts. But number three, which is probably even more worrying, is the fact that we have not demonstrated to them that the NPA, for example, is investigating independently without any kind of interference by politicians.
Yeah, Thabo, so I think crucially I think we all recognize as South Africans we don't need an international body like the Financial Action Task Force to tell us we're not doing what's needed. We and civil society have been saying for quite some time that things aren't where they should be in terms of the NPA's role. The National Director and others bristle when we make these comments, and they've come out strongly in stronger worded statements as if one cannot be critical of public officials. Well, very clearly, you now have this international body saying that we're going to punish South Africa, we're going to greylist South Africa. As you said, we squeaked over the finish line to get all kind of legislation passed in December last year. It took us way too many years to do that. And frankly, one of the big reasons was that the corrupt networks did not want that legislation, particularly in terms of the legislation that would entail better work by the Financial Intelligence Center to proceed. But of those 67 concerns that were raised by the FATF, we were left with a handful of approximately 8 areas that we haven't fully addressed, and the role of the police and the prosecutions are quite central to the criticism that remains. And I think that again this New Lane or Nulani matter, as you point out, again is just grist to the mill to make that point that we are not prepared and not ready to take on high-profile corruption cases. There are very few countries or jurisdictions in the world where you win big cases like this overnight, Thabo. So I think one appreciates that you need time and you need expertise, but you've got to bring in expertise if necessary from outside, external counsel. We know at one point most of the counsel effectively were fired working on big state capture cases. We hear that they are being brought in piecemeal again. It's unclear what the strategy is, and it's not enough for the National Director of Public Prosecutions and our colleagues to keep on telling us there's sunshine, it's going to be fine. We are being punished as a country by the Financial Action Task Force, and when you say we, the very well wealthy people in our country are going to be shielded by this. They have cash abroad. The value of the rand dropping is going to be unpleasant when they want to go on their overseas holidays. But it's going to be ordinary folks who suffer the most when businesses take a knock, when people lose jobs. And this is, I think, while we know that corruption and state capture is not without consequence, our inability to hold the powerful to account who have committed those crimes equally is not without consequence. And we've seen that very painfully in this grey listing decision that was made last week. So, it's not only one person, and I've mentioned the national director. She's obviously a lightning rod as the leader, but the Hawks equally, I think, should stand accused for their inability to be able to properly investigate and wrap up a whole slew of cases. It's not only 9 seminal cases that you've cherry-picked. There are dozens, and there are literally hundreds of individuals and corporations that have been named in the Zondo Commission report, and who should be held to account, every single one of them. But we see no real spirited action, and that has to change, and that's the pressure we need to be bringing on those individuals, public officials, and institutions to do their jobs better.
So you seem to believe that the UAE successfully dodged the bullet as far as them getting grey listed by demonstrating something rather simple. Just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. So Thabo, as many viewers might know, the United Arab Emirates, or Dubai, is not only a great shopping destination, it's one of the prime destinations for laundering money from corruption. It plays the same role that small countries like Luxembourg play, or for that matter, the City of London does. It's a haven for stolen money, and money that is primarily stolen from working class people around the world. And what happened in the UAE is that it was placed on a grey list, and it fought tooth and nail. It has been fighting tooth and nail to get off that grey list, because what the UAE has known for longer, quite frankly, I think, than some of our own officials, fears that they can see a lot of the big corporations that enable that money laundering, the big auditing firms, the consulting firms, will go to other capitals in the Middle East instead of doing their primary business in the UAE. So they wanted to get off that list. What did they do? I think they ran a very successful PR exercise, which the Emirates have come to do. What they did effectively was they said, we are going to give you the Guptas. That was a year ago, if you recall. So they acceded to the request of the South Africans to extradite the Guptas. Right now, given what we've seen, the way in which the South African authorities have acted, one gets the feeling that it's the Guptas who've played the FATF and the South Africans. They kind of knew that the South Africans were likely to bungle this, the South African authorities likely to bungle the extradition of the Guptas, and I fear that that's the direction that we're heading in right now.
All right, that is Open Secrets Director Hennie van Vuuren.